on finding out what was in those pages so that we can investigate and prosecute and hold those responsible for any wrongdoing. Since that time, the items in the 28 pages have been released in one way or another through leaks, through innuendo, through talks, and none of it has proven to be substantiated in any way. The 28 pages were reviewed by U.S. intelligence agencies. The CIA director, the director of national intelligence, came out and said that there is no involvement of the Saudi government of 9/11. The Senate Intelligence Committee did its own investigation, came to the same conclusion, and so the matter is now finished. And we hope that with the release of these pages, the aspersions that have been cast against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia over the past 14 years will come to an end, and we hope that we can focus on moving forward in a cooperative way in order to go after the men, the money, and the mindset that represents a threat to your people and ours. Since the tragic events of 9/11, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has embarked on a series of major steps in confronting terrorism. We have reviewed our textbooks, we have reviewed our mosques, we have put in place financial control mechanisms that are unprecedented for any other country. We have shut down institutions that use fundraising in order to support extremist causes and terrorism. We have put in place laws to criminalize terror financing. We have detained a large number of people. We have prosecuted a large number of people. We have jailed a large number of people. We have put in place better systems in terms of looking at cash couriers. We have enhanced our counterterrorism capabilities to where today the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is in the forefront of countries when it comes to fighting terrorism. We have fought Al-Qaeda in Saudi Arabia. We fight them in Yemen. We fight Daesh in Syria. We work with our allies, primarily the United States, but other allies, in going after the terrorists and those who support their actions. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has also led international efforts to mobilize the world against the scourge of terrorism. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was one of the first countries to implement a nationwide national awareness campaign against terrorism and extremism. We hosted the first International Counterterrorism Conference in Riyadh in 2005 that brought together over 50 countries and explores ways to most effectively fight terrorism. In the same year, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia called for the establishment of an international counterterrorism center at the United Nations. We funded this center subsequently with about $110 million in order to strengthen the UN's ability to bring together the countries of the world in the fight against terrorism. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia most recently also formed an Islamic alliance that comprises 40 countries to fight terrorism and the ideology that is behind it. We have an operations center in Riyadh. We have held meetings with our alliance partners in this area, and we are determined to continue to work to strengthen bilateral and multilateral efforts to go after terrorism and those who finance it and those who condone it. Once again, I think the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a victim of terrorism. Osama bin Laden's objective in attacking the United States was to attack the US-Saudi relationship. He believed that a weakening of this relationship would cause the Saudi state to be weak and more vulnerable to take over by terrorists and extremists. And his objective was not achieved, thank God. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is committed and determined to use all of its resources in order to go after the terrorists and to work with other countries to do so. Terrorism has no religion, it has no nationality, it has no ethnicity, it has no humanity. It is incumbent upon all of us to do everything in our power to defeat it. And so with that, I would like to stop here and take a few questions if you have any.
Yes, Ian Talley, Wall Street Journal. There are a number of points in here just linking Saudi embassy contacts with Ian Talley, Wall Street Journal. There are a number of contacts made with embassy officials at the time in the report. Are you saying that this report fully exonerates the Saudi government?
Absolutely. That's what they say. That's what the DNI says. That's what the director of CIA says. The Saudi embassy gets tens of thousands of visitors every year. Does it mean that the hijackers, by buying tickets on United Airlines, are in cahoots with United Airlines? Of course not. The 9/11 crime is probably the most investigated crime in history. For anyone to think that any leads were not pursued is really unrealistic. The US government agencies, with their tremendous responsibilities, have looked into this and have come to the conclusion that is very clear. There is no Saudi government involvement or involvement by Saudi officials in the events of 9/11. So I don't know how one can be more clear than this. Karen?
Mr. Minister, this is a sort of another way, I think, of asking the same question and following up on your statements about what Saudi Arabia has done internally and in terms of its own government at home to fight terrorism and stop financing. What the report does detail is that a number of people with connections with or in direct employ of the Saudi embassy in the United States did have contact in one way or another with at least two of the hijackers. And I wonder if, as a result, in the ways you have changed doing business, there's been any changes in the way the embassy operates and its consulates in terms of who they have in their employ and what kind of activities those people engage in. And as a separate question, I wonder if I could ask you to comment on the current talks in Moscow between the United States and Russia about a coordination of their counterterrorism efforts there. Do you believe that that will be good for the fight against the Islamic State in Syria?
With regards to the way we do business, I believe that after 9/11, every government around the world has changed the way it does business. Every government around the world has become more vigilant. Every government around the world has become more systematic and more cautious in how it deals with its employees and with others, including the Saudi government. There is no doubt after 9/11 we discovered that people took advantage of the charity of our people, people took advantage of the generosity of our people, and we took firm steps to ensure that nobody can take advantage of this in order to fund extremism, much less terrorism. We were on the forefront of countries that designated institutions that were supporting terrorism or extremism or suspected of supporting those terrorism or extremism, including, if you recall, the Al-Haramain Foundation. We designated it and I believe more than a dozen of its branches around the world as sponsors of terrorism so that it would be sanctioned. We shut down their offices, including the office in the United States. And we worked with the US and with other partners to find other institutions or individuals, Saudi or otherwise, that could be designated so we can put an end to their activities. And I think that our record has been a very good record in terms of cutting off funding for terrorism and in terms of going after the terrorists. Saudi Arabia has suffered greatly at the hands of terrorists. Our country was attacked many, many times, and we just have to go through the record. Many of our security officials gave their lives in the defense of their people. Many of our citizens were killed, and we have taken very strong measures against terrorists and extremists. And the most recent attacks, if you recall, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia occurred on July 4th. But these attacks will not stop our resolve or our commitment to ending the scourge of terrorism. With regards to the talks in Moscow, we're following them. Anything that can be done to bring the Russians into the fight against Daesh in an effective way is something that I think people would welcome. But it cannot be at the cost of keeping Bashar al-Assad in power, and it cannot be with the Russians continuing to attack the moderate Syrian opposition.
نشر هذه الوثائق هو المحافظة على سرية المعلومات الاستخبارية وطرق الحصول عليها. وهل توافق الرأي بأنه ربما النزعة السرية عنها الآن أو الدفع بنزعة السرية عنها الآن هو كان مسيس بالدرجة الأولى؟
لو تسمح لي ترجمها. The question was, do you believe that the classification of the 28 pages had to do with protecting sources and methods, and do you believe that the release of the 28 pages today has a political motive to it? بالنسبة لل 28 صفحة لا يوجد فيها سرية. ما تم نشره في 28 صفحة تم تداوله من أكثر من 12 سنة. فلا أعلم لماذا تم حجب هذه الصفحات. والمملكة العربية السعودية كما ذكرت طالبت من أكثر من 13 سنة بأن يرفع الحجب عن هذه الصفحات وأن تنشر لكي نعلم ماذا فيها ونستطيع أن نحقق ونستطيع أن نعاقب أي مسؤول أو شخص سعودي قد يكون له علاقة في 11 سبتمبر. ولكن التحقيقات التي أجرتها الأجهزة الأمنية في الولايات المتحدة وصلت إلى نتيجة أنه لا يوجد أي ارتباط بأي شكل كان من الحكومة السعودية أو من مسؤولين سعوديين في أحداث 11 سبتمبر. فيما يتعلق بنشر هذه الصفحات أعتقد أنه بالنسبة لوجهة نظر المملكة العربية السعودية هذا شيء إيجابي، لأنه الآن نستطيع أن ننهي هذه الصفحة من 11 سبتمبر ونستطيع أن ننظر إلى المستقبل وليس إلى الماضي. I was saying that the classification of the 28 pages was a decision that the US government made. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia had called as soon as they were redacted for their release because we wanted to see what's in them. And I certainly don't believe that there's anything in them that should have been classified to begin with. And I can't speak to the motive behind the classification of those pages. The release of those pages is something we welcome because it puts an end to the mystery of what may be or may not be in the 28 pages.
معاذ العمري صحيفة الحياة. مع الوزير الآن ما بعد نشر الصفحات، ألا يحق للمملكة العربية السعودية أن تخطو الخطوة بوثوق وبثقة تامة بمقاضاة كل من اتهمها أو حاول النيل من سمعتها في هذا الملف؟
هذه الموضوع المرافعات أو من قبل حكومات ودول أمر في له جوانب عديدة وفي هناك أيضا تعقيدات كثيرة. المملكة العربية السعودية يهمها سمعتها، المملكة العربية السعودية يهمها أن الحقائق تظهر وتكون واضحة، المملكة العربية السعودية يهمها أن العالم يوصل لقناعة بأن ما كانت تتهم به المملكة لا أساس له، وهذا ما توصلنا إليه والله الحمد. Yes, sir. Okay, both of you, one and then the other.
Thank you very much, Minister. On reading the 28 pages that have been released, are you disappointed to see the degree of suspicion that existed within the US government about your government? The CIA, the FBI, and Congress all sounded extremely suspicious about what should be a close ally.
I don't believe that it was extreme suspicion. I believe 9/11 was a major crime. It had a huge impact on not only the United States but the world, and it would be natural for people to try to pursue any lead, even if the lead is outrageous. So I can understand people wanting to pursue leads, and we welcomed it. We in fact cooperated with the US in pursuing any leads that they may approach us with. The 28 pages, when you read them, do not really reflect the views of, I believe, institutions such as the FBI or the CIA. I think there were some individuals or officials who were quoted, but I wouldn't see it as extreme suspicion. I think it was responding to charges or leads that were put before them. When I read the 28 pages, what comes through is even the congressional committee made it very clear in the text that we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We don't have the capability to investigate. And then they handed over these leads or questions to the FBI and the CIA, which then conducted a thorough investigation and came out with the conclusion that there is no there there. So I'm not disappointed. I think people were doing their job as they should, and the conclusions have come out. We had no doubt that there was no there in the 28 pages, and that's why we wanted them released. And if there was anything there, we wanted to be able to prosecute those who may have been responsible.
But victims' families are welcoming this, saying that this is going to give them an opportunity now to further question the Saudi government. You say that there are, in fact, items in the report that say we don't know, that it was inconclusive. Given this fact that there sort of was no final determination in there about the reliability of the information, and the report also suggests, quote, there could be support for these terrorists within the Saudi government. How do you quell that sort of continued speculative?
I think you're confusing two items. What you were quoting was in the congressional report. The subsequent investigations by the security agencies, the FBI and the CIA, that were very thorough, came to the conclusion that these concerns are not valid. These leads are not leads. These charges are baseless. And therefore, the conclusion was there is no involvement of the Saudi government or Saudi government officials in the events of 9/11. So that puts to rest the charges that people have levied against Saudi Arabia.
But
when
I think
when
the
the congressional,
the families
I'd like to
aren't
make
feeling that way.
one point.
Okay.
When the congressional report says we don't know, that's the conclusion of the congressional report, and then they handed it over to the security agencies who know and who investigated and who came to the conclusion that there is no there. So that's final. And with regards to the, as I said earlier, the 28 pages were used by people to cast aspersions against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and level charges emanating from blank pages. We could not respond to them because we didn't know what they are. Now they're out. And now we know that they were investigated by your own security services, who came to the conclusion that there is no involvement by Saudi Arabia, government, or officials in the events of 9/11. So this should finally put to rest this matter.
And I think my question is that I think that there are those in the United States, specifically victims' families, who feel just the opposite. So how do you counter that and continue to use this, perhaps even as a tool, to quell that sort of lingering suspicion, those who don't feel that it is definitive,
We
as you
feel
stated?
for the families of the victims, as we feel for the families of victims who have suffered from terrorism all over the world. There is no doubt about it. What they went through and what they're going through is very painful. And so they have our sympathy in this. But we can't convince everybody. The facts are here, and the facts say there's no involvement by the Saudi government or Saudi officials in the events of 9/11. So this should put to rest the charges leveled against Saudi Arabia. Are people still going to question it? There are still people in the US and around the world who don't think the moon landing took place. So, and it doesn't matter how persuasive one can be in order to convince people of it, but we have the facts. And the facts point in one direction, and the facts are very clear. The White House said there's no Saudi government involvement or Saudi officials. The CIA, the DNI, the FBI, these are all your security services and your political leadership. And I think that it would be stunning for me, for anyone to think that American security services would not pursue leads involving the murder of 3,000 Americans. 300%. Yes.
Julie Bacagno with CBS News. The report mentioned at least one Saudi who was able to escape before the FBI was able to interview him, the intelligence service agencies. So I was just wondering, are you aware of any whereabouts of people who may have been able to escape interview?
I think I'd like to clarify one point before I answer the question. We should not confuse what's in the 28 pages with what was subsequently determined. The 28 pages were written 13 years ago or 14 years ago. What we read in them today is what people speculated, thought occurred back then. For a number of years after the pages were redacted, your security services conducted thorough investigations of everything that was in there and came to the conclusion that there is no there there. So when you speak about this individual and you say he escaped the country before they were able to question him, that's no longer the case. That issue was investigated, and if that issue had not been resolved adequately, we would still be dealing with it from a government-to-government basis. We have said to the US government then that if they have any leads or any questions, that we will work with them on getting the answers, and we have. And so I want to make sure that you are careful not to see what was published in the 28 pages 13 years ago and take the questions that are in the 28 pages and assume that they have not been resolved. Those questions have been dealt with in the subsequent investigations, and they have been found to be without merit. Yes.
My name is Yara Bayumi from Reuters. I'm going to move a bit from the 28 pages.
Okay.
If that's okay. I just wanted to go back to the attacks that your country suffered on the 4th of July. Do you have? I mean, I believe that the kingdom has said that it believes that they may be tied to Islamic State. Is there any concrete proof that Islamic State is in fact behind those attacks? Are you worried about more attacks of a similar nature, especially with regards to the one that happened at Medina? And how would you classify the threat that the kingdom is facing against Islamic State compared to the threat that you faced against Al-Qaeda in the early 2000s? Do you think this is a greater threat?
Terrorism is a threat. Terrorism is a great threat. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been at the crosshairs of terrorist organizations. After 9/11, Al-Qaeda attacked Saudi Arabia before 9/11 and after 9/11. We were able to push back against Al-Qaeda, jail, capture many of their operatives and recruiters and fundraisers. With Daesh, we're also engaged in a battle with them. Their objective is to seize the holy cities of Islam. It's not going to happen. They're neither a state nor are they Islamic. They're psychopaths, perverts, criminals. They have no humanity, they have no faith. And the objective of the world is to destroy them. And we will. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has suffered many attacks by Daesh in the eastern province, in other places. Their objective is to try to light sectarian fires, and they have failed. Their objective is to destabilize the kingdom, and they have failed. We are determined to go after them and those who recruit for them and raise money for them, and we will prevail, God willing. So is it a threat? Of course it's a threat. Terrorism today is a threat to every country in the world, and terrorism can take different shapes and forms and different ideologies, but at the end of the day, the killing of the innocent is terrorism. No faith accepts this. In the Islamic faith, we say that it is revealed in the Quran that he who kills an innocent soul is as if he killed all of humanity. There is no justification for terrorism. And yes, we take this threat very seriously. We take the threat of terrorism very seriously, and we are working very robustly to confront it. Yes, sir.
Do you have any comment on the coup underway in Ankara?
I can't comment about something that is not clear yet, so we'll have to see how it plays out.
The Prime Minister Erdogan...
I can't speculate about something that
Sure,
I read
I'm
about
not going to ask you about speculation.
Yes.
Prime Minister Erdogan said several months ago he was concerned about a coup, and if a coup were to occur, it obviously has wider ramifications outside of Turkey. So
I am not going to speculate about events that are taking place in Turkey where the picture is not clear, and when the picture is clear, then you can feel free to ask me the question. Can I take maybe a last question? Go ahead.
Given what came out in the report today, how concerned are you today about the JASTA legislation potentially going through Congress? Does this ease those fears at all for you all?
Are we?
Concerned about the JASTA, the legislation that would allow for this to see?
Well, you said given what came out in the 28 pages. Nothing came out in the 28 pages. Everything that's in the 28 pages had been discussed and had been leaked and had been responded to over the past 12 or 13 years. So the surprise in the 28 pages is that there is no surprise. So that's one part. So I'm hoping that now that this is out, we conclude this chapter and we move forward and we work together in order to defeat the terrorists who are threatening your people and ours. That's our view. The JASTA legislation is really an American issue. The JASTA legislation, in weakening the principle of sovereign immunities, would complicate international relations around the world. The United States has the biggest footprint around the world, and the United States would then be subject to lawsuits all over the world for actions that are considered sovereign actions. I believe that virtually all countries in the world oppose a dilution of the principle of sovereign immunities for that very reason. International relations have been governed since the Treaty of Westphalia in the 1600s by the principle of sovereign immunities. A court in one country does not sit in judgment on the actions of another government. And that's how you maintain order. The diluting this principle turns the international system into the law of the jungle. And you cannot conduct the affairs of state in the manner in which you're supposed to conduct them. So this applies to every country, every government in the world, not just Saudi Arabia. How 28 pages relate to JASTA, you should ask somebody else about this. The 28 pages were used, as I said, to cast aspersions on Saudi Arabia. And everybody talked about, once they're released, it will show incontrovertible proof that Saudi Arabia is guilty, that Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11, that Saudi Arabia committed 9/11. Not true. The 28 pages don't reveal anything. The 28 pages, the charges that were in them were investigated by US security agencies. The conclusion was no involvement by the Saudi government or Saudi officials in the events of 9/11. I don't know what can be more clear than this. So that chapter hopefully will be closed now. The issue with JASTA is really an issue that involves international relations and that involves every country in the world. And I think that the US Congress is wise enough to recognize the potential dangers of this legislation. Thank you very much, everyone.